There's a serial killer on the loose, striking mid-afternoon during the summer months. These paramedics have only minutes to save a life, and they fear they could be next.
For the victims, death is very sudden. They frequently have a history of having just suddenly exploded. They all have shredded clothing. Frequently they have burns, singed hair, and most of them have ruptured eardrums. Some actually have skull fractures, and some have bruises on their heart.
He's got a wound here on the bottom of his foot.
The killer's pattern is unmistakable.
10-4, he's left his usual calling card. The patient has the classic symptoms. He's unconscious, not breathing, cardiac standstill, and he has strange, what appear to be burn marks all over his body.
This serial killer comes from the sky. Its name, Lightning. The effects of lightning on the human body are devastating.
Electrical activity.
When they come in and they're undergoing CPR, most of them, it's because they have had a respiratory death followed by a cardiac death.
Did you advise the ER of a possible lightning strike due to the large burn on his right chest and the exit wound out of his right foot?
Yes, I did advise them.
Even though the heart restarts, it will stop again because it doesn't have any oxygen. Bystanders who witness lightning strike generally need to start breathing for that person that is down on the ground and generally unresponsive, since most lightning strikes with people cause them to be briefly unconscious.
Lightning can strike anywhere in the world, but some places are particularly vulnerable. One part of the U.S. is hit so hard it's known as Lightning Alley, a strip 100 miles wide running across the state of Florida with the highest incidence of lightning in the country.
It can be sometimes very challenging being a paramedic in the state of Florida, and I remember one call in particular that we ran together where a 15-year-old child and his grandmother had been struck by lightning. I remember on the beach, the lightning was hitting very close around us, and every hair on my body, it seemed like, was standing on end.
I remember the air being filled with electricity. We were down on our stomachs trying to keep from becoming victims ourselves. We knew that we had to perform CPR on the child to at least keep him alive to the hospital till they could resuscitate him there. And it was very frightening experience.
We have a joke in Florida that you have a better chance of being hit by lightning than you do winning the lottery. Unfortunately, there are multiple deaths. Most deaths don't make it to the emergency room.
The causes of lightning are still largely unknown. We do know that during thunderstorms, huge electrostatic charges are generated. Most of the energy is released as lightning inside clouds, but occasionally a cloud sends a massive electrical discharge to Earth. In order to find out just how much lightning is striking the Earth, one American company has set up a network of detectors sensitive enough to locate a single lightning bolt anywhere in the U.S.
The National Lightning Detection Network in the U.S. has about 105 antennas, as we can see on this map up here. The green dots and letters show where the antennas are, and they are locating the lightning across the U.S. in the last 4 hours on this display. We see the storm up in the upper Midwest with clouds moving southeast and lots of lightning. Another one in the northeast. The typical afternoon summertime storms over Florida are developing. And then over the southwestern states, there's the monsoon beginning to light up here around midday. We know now that we average about 25 million cloud-to-ground flashes per year in the United States.
As lightning strikes the Earth, it sends out an electromagnetic pulse that is picked up by the antennas. Sensors inside the antennas measure the angle of the pulse and the time it took to get there. This information is then fed back by satellite to the control center in Tucson for computer analysis, and the location is pinpointed. One of the most surprising discoveries is that lightning is blind as it streaks towards the Earth. It is only in about the last 100 feet that it senses the Earth's electromagnetic field and selects a place to strike.
When it does come down, you can see in this picture here that it's coming in little 50-yard steps, 50-meter-long steps called step leaders. It keeps coming down toward the ground. In this part of the channel, this is the one that made it to ground. You can see these other channels here. You can see that it was really trying to make it to the ground, but it didn't make it. For we don't know why they go over here like this. But then, as it comes closer to the ground, when it gets down to this last little part here, this is the really important part. This last 30 to 50 yards, it looks for something to hit just in this little area.
As the stepped leader streaks towards the Earth, anything sticking up, buildings, trees, even people, send up positive streamers in response. When they connect, lightning is born. Negative electrons are discharged to Earth, and a positive charge travels back up the cloud at 60,000 miles a second. Here, 2 streamers leave the tree, but only one successfully connects with the stepped leader. The telephone pole has also launched a streamer, a failed lightning bolt. Packing up to 100 million volts of electricity, lightning has the power to explode walls of concrete and destroy electrical systems. Each bolt is 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. Exposure to its power for a fraction of a second can be lethal.
Actually, lightning generates tremendous amounts of heat, and with that comes instant water vaporization, which with wet clothing results in an explosive appearance of the clothing. It becomes shredded, metallic objects become fused, such as zippers. And surprisingly, with all this heat that's being generated, there are relatively few burns and some singeing of hair. What we also know now is that there's a tremendous amount of explosive effect or mechanical effect of the lightning that will cause eardrums to rupture. It can cause bruising of the heart and contusions of the brain, as well as some skull fractures.
With this sort of power, it's surprising that anyone survives. It's a hot, humid summer's day. Thousands of people are gathered at RFK Stadium for the Freedom for Tibet concert. Suddenly, disaster strikes. One young woman has been singled out from the crowd by a lightning bolt, stopping her heart and paralyzing her lungs. 3 years later, the victim has made a remarkable recovery.
My sister Amanda and I were sitting around here when we came to the concert, and it was a nice day in Washington, which is unusual in June. It was sunny and not too hot, and we were watching the show, and all of a sudden a huge cloud came out of nowhere without any rain, and a bolt of lightning came out from the sky and hit me right on my head. I was thrown onto the ground, and 2 people near me in the crowd rushed over.
Luckily, one of those people was an off-duty doctor.
She was bleeding from her lips at the time, so we wiped the blood off of her lips, and we started CPR right then. And we also started chest compressions at the same time because she didn't have a heart rate. And it was about 10 minutes after I had initially seen her that she regained a heart rate of her own. Without the CPR, she probably would have been brain dead.
Lisa had taken a direct hit from the lightning. As she was rushed off in the ambulance, the medics didn't know if she would survive. But why had Lisa been selected from a crowd of over 66,000 people? She wasn't the tallest object. There was the top of the stadium. Even the musicians on the elevated stage would have been an easier target. A discovery made 60 years ago may hold the key to Lisa's mysterious attack. Throughout the 1930s and 40s, the General Electric Company studied the way lightning bolts hit the Empire State Building in New York. They found that the Empire State was hit on average about 23 times a year. But when the team went back and analyzed their photographs, they were amazed to find that the lightning occasionally missed the top of the building. It appears that sometimes a lightning bolt is too weak to trigger a streamer until it gets much closer to the ground. By this time, it may have already missed the tallest object.
This makes it possible for a leader, if it's very weak, doesn't have much charge in it, to propagate down towards the ground parallel to, say, a tall building like the Empire State Building. And if it always stays 50 or 60 meters away, it could come all the way down near the bottom before a leader comes off the side of the building at some random point and meets it, and then the lightning attaches to the side of the building. So the tallest thing around is not always what gets hit. Leaders without much charge on them can work their way in between buildings, or can hit the bottoms of trees, or can do things that you wouldn't think otherwise would occur.
The bolt that struck Lisa may have sent down a weak-stepped leader, which sneaked past the top of the stadium and the stage. Other people in the audience, as well as Lisa, would have sent up streamers to try and trigger the lightning bolt, but as it zigzagged closer and closer to the crowd, it was only Lisa's streamer that made the fateful connection. As the lightning flashed over Lisa, the searing heat caused second- and third-degree burns over 20% of her body.
These are the clothes I was wearing when I was hit by lightning. My mom kept them so I'd understand the sheer force of what I survived. The shirt, you can see, was just totally blown away. And my bra, which had a metal underwire, was melted, the metal, and it caused a third-degree burn under my one breast. Something I never understood, though, was how this could have happened if I was wearing 2-inch thick rubber sneakers. I even asked the doctors in the hospital when I realized what happened to me. I later learned that sneakers aren't going to save you if there's a lightning bolt anywhere near you.
Lightning hits the Earth 100 times a second. In the U.S. alone, there are more than 25 million cloud-to-ground strikes each year. About 1,200 of these will hit people, and 100 will be fatal. The reason why so many people are struck each year is that our fluid-filled bodies provide excellent pathways for electrical charge.
The thing about the body is that it's a very good conductor of electricity. Most of the fluids in the body are very salty, and so they conduct very well indeed. And I can show you that on this ball here. These little streamers are just like lightning, except they're very, very small in the way of current. And you can see just how concentrated the electricity becomes. If I put my whole hand, you can see how most of the streamers concentrate around the hand. And it's being conducted down my arm and through my body and away to Earth. Now, perhaps I can make that a little plainer by using this fluorescent tube, and I can conduct current through the fluorescent tube. If I put the tube like so, you can see current is being transferred through here, along through my right arm, and down and away to Earth. If I do it on this side, the same happens, but on the other half of the body.
The same property that allows us to conduct electricity from the plasma ball also makes us living lightning rods.
Lightning is very interesting. It consists of streamers of electricity, just like this, just like sparks in many ways, but they are very, very short, and we're talking perhaps 100 millionths of a second or thereabouts.
3 years later, Lisa is back to normal.
When I feel like I'm taking life for granted, I take a step back and I go, you're extremely lucky, because there's a huge chance that you wouldn't have been here, so enjoy today.
Lisa was very lucky. Only a small number of people who suffer a direct hit from a lightning strike live to tell the tale. But even if you escape a direct hit, lightning can still seek you out and cause devastation. In the middle of a children's soccer game, the skies open. Players take shelter under a tree, and the coach puts up a large umbrella. It's a terrible mistake. 17 people feel the force of the lightning strike. But how could so many have been hit by a single bolt? Most victims are not hit by lightning directly, but by a charge that jumps from a nearby object, such as a tree. This side flash still has enough power to stop the heart and burn the skin. Victims can also be shocked from below. Immediately after a strike, the ground becomes electrified. The current travels through the person where they make contact with the ground, usually up one leg and down the other.
If you're caught out of doors in a thunderstorm, the best thing to do is get indoors in a sizable building. If you can't do that, you should get into a metal car.
The car's metal body discharges the current away from the driver and to earth.
Never stand under the tallest tree. Try to stay off hills where you're the tallest object.
But you're not totally safe indoors.
If you're indoors, you shouldn't touch anything that's connected to the outside because the lightning could strike that outside and come in. And that includes the telephones with wires, shouldn't be leaning against the refrigerator, shouldn't be near the house plumbing, shouldn't be in the shower. Just stay away from everything.
Amazingly, all 17 victims survived. But lightning may be powerful enough to kill even if it doesn't touch its victim. Every year in the U.S., young, healthy hikers are found dead in the mountains, struck down by a mystery killer. In the past, coroners have recorded a verdict of natural causes, but there may be an alternative explanation.
Some of the victims actually come to us with very minimal or even no injuries. They might have some singeing of hair, a few minor burns, but nothing else to really give us a clue as to why the individual died. We do a complete autopsy and we're still left with no indicator as to why this person died.
The key to explaining these mysterious deaths came from the golf course. A group of golfers are caught out in the open during a thunderstorm. Above them, huge negative charges build within the clouds. They head for cover, but it's a fatal decision. The tree sends a streamer skyward and triggers a lightning strike. 3 receive direct hits and are knocked unconscious. A 4th golfer is not so lucky. Though untouched by the strike, he mysteriously suffers a fatal heart attack. Lightning expert Dr. Michael Charrington set out to investigate.
Tragic situation of a golfer being killed on a golf course was most extraordinary in this case because there was no evidence that lightning had touched his body. There were no burns on his body and no external evidence that lightning touched him. And yet it's obvious that lightning killed him.
One clue came from Little League. Dr. Charrington had heard reports of children suffering heart attacks, not after being struck by lightning, but by a baseball. Doctors found that the heart is particularly vulnerable for a fraction of a second just between beats.
So it would appear to us that maybe lightning and baseballs, both trauma to the heart, have a similarity if it happens to strike at that particularly vulnerable part of the cardiac cycle.
Scientists have long known that lightning creates huge pulses of electromagnetic energy. These same pulses interfere with radio and TV reception. They can even be strong enough to cause electrical equipment to mysteriously spring to life. Could these pulses affect people? No trace has been found in human tissue, but Dr. Wetley has other evidence.
One of the things we can do, however, is to check metallic objects that were worn by the person. Zippers, brassiere fasteners, things such as metallic keys or watches, particularly with metal bands. Anything that contains iron may become magnetized by a lightning strike. And when that happens, then we can detect the magnetism by simply bringing the object in proximity to an ordinary directional compass. And that will give us our biggest clue sometimes as to the cause of death.
Steel-capped boots and even underwired bras worn by the victims will become strongly magnetized. Dr. Charrington thinks this electromagnetic charge could be strong enough to travel some distance from the strike and disrupt the heart.
And we came to an explanation which we think might account for these strange phenomena. When lightning strikes near someone, an intense magnetic field is built which can induce an electrical current within their body, and that electrical current can interfere with the heart's rhythm, causing a heart attack, even though the lightning doesn't strike them at all. If the induced current interferes with the cardiac rhythm at a particularly vulnerable part of that person's cardiac cycle, the repolarization period, they are particularly vulnerable to a heart attack.
The heart is a finely tuned piece of electrical equipment, charging and discharging about once every second. In between each beat, the heart pauses to recharge before triggering a new cycle of electrical activity. This occurs during the T wave. During this phase, the heart is extremely vulnerable. Dr. Charrington believes that a lightning strike during the T wave could even stop the heart.
I think our hypothesis may well explain some of these mysterious cases, such as this golfer and such as some of the young, healthy hikers found dead in the mountains. The conventional wisdom, the lightning can strike directly, down from the sky, a direct strike. A second way lightning can enter the body is striking a tree and then flashing from the tree to the body. And a third is if lightning hits the ground, the current travels along the ground and then enters the body. Our hypothesis adds a fourth possibility, that lightning can kill you without even hitting you.
When lightning does touch the body, the killer can leave behind strange electrical fingerprints that mysteriously disappear within a day. When nature writer Gretel Ehrlich woke up after a near-fatal lightning strike on her Wyoming ranch, she was horrified by the marks on her body.
The doctor at the hospital ripped open my shirt to attach me to the EKG machine, and he saw then suddenly that I had this vine-like pattern. It was a red pattern all over my chest and down my arms. And he said, "Oh, I do know now for sure that you've been hit by lightning. These only occur for people who have been struck directly."
Since these skin markings were first reported over 300 years ago, doctors have been struggling to explain what causes them. The patterns are fractals, endlessly branching patterns discovered using computers in the late 1970s. These same branching patterns are seen again and again in nature, in living organisms, and on the surface of the Earth itself. Even lightning bolts have a fractal pattern. But why should lightning create these marks on the skin?
We never knew exactly what they were due to. We frequently assumed that they were due to burns from the lightning strike itself. But in one case, I was actually able to examine this under the microscope, and to my surprise, this was not a burn at all, but essentially a bruise. The pattern comes from the electrical effect of the lightning, and that in turn causes capillaries, or very tiny blood vessels of the body, to rupture, and the blood then goes into the skin to form this particular pattern.
In a high-voltage lab in Holland, doctors captured similar patterns on photographic paper. They now believe these markings are formed by a positive charge foraging across the skin in search of negative electrons. Gretel would also have to endure another of lightning's strange medical effects. She was temporarily paralyzed by the strike.
There are other interesting things that happen too. One of them is a thing called coronoparalysis. The lightning affects the blood vessels or the nerves to stop blood flow in the limb concerned. So the limb loses its pulses, it loses its sensation, and obviously then loses its movement.
I thought maybe I'd been shot in the back because I was paralyzed down one side. And I couldn't talk, my throat was paralyzed, I couldn't swallow. I lay there for a long time just thinking I was going to die, and then I didn't, so I got quite angry and tried to get up and fell over and got up and fell over. I finally made it up and somehow, although I don't remember anymore, walked back down to the ranch and got help.
Fortunately, lightning paralysis usually wears off after a few hours. But the ordeal was not over yet. Gretel was to experience a much more unusual and long-term effect to her body. During the 2 years after Gretel Ehrlich was struck by lightning, she passed out thousands of times. She consulted specialists across the U.S. and underwent hundreds of tests in a desperate search to find out what the lightning had done to her body.
The doctors figured out that my blood vessels had actually lost their muscle tone, so they were unable to constrict and create blood pressure. And that the myelinated sheaths that surround the neural pathways had been probably melted so that neurotransmitters weren't making their way, telling my body to, constrict, for my heart to beat faster.
As well as fainting, Gretel experienced mental confusion.
I had trouble putting ideas together, putting even sentences together. So I could remember who I was and everything about where I was. I just couldn't remember how to make everything fit together.
Many of the problems suffered by lightning victims seem to be linked to sensitive areas of the brain, but until recently it was a mystery how lightning could have reached them. But when Chris Andrews did animal experiments, he made a discovery that explained what was happening.
Our research indicates that lightning enters the so-called holes in the head. The current can enter the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears, and from there, if you look at the anatomy, the pathway to the brain stem is very plain.
Like all our body cells, the brain is bathed in a salty solution, and salt water is a perfect conductor of electricity. Wherever the brain is in contact with this salty fluid, damage from lightning is seen.
Once lightning current gets near the brain, we have to work out what's happening to the brain cells themselves. This is still rather mysterious, but we do see changes under the microscope. Among the changes we've seen are some cell death, some cell replacement with some fibrous tissue, cellular swelling, and changes in the anatomy of the cells, if you like, so that their function must be altered. At this stage, we're not entirely sure exactly what that means. This demands further investigation.
Overcoming the damaging effects of one lightning strike can be hard enough, but a few rare individuals, like Park Ranger Roy Sullivan, are proof that lightning can strike twice and more. His daughter remembers his first strike.
This is from the first one. That's in 42, and lightning went through his watch. You can see it has a hole through side to side.
For 27 years after this first strike, Roy was untroubled by lightning until one fateful day in 1969. A side flash bounced into his truck, hitting him in the neck and burning his head. The odds against Roy being struck a third time were over 1,000,000,000 to 1. But only a year later, near his home, lightning hit a transformer and arced to his left shoulder. But this was not the end. In 1972, while taking refuge from a storm inside a mountain station, Roy Sullivan was singled out for a fourth time.
I recall Roy having lost all of his hair on his head. He also had a burn around his ankle that was, I would consider, substantial.
Morning, Rick.
How are you, Roy?
Pretty good.
Working at Loft today?
Sure am.
Have a good one.
You too.
By 1973, Roy had taken to carrying a bucket of water with him when he made his rounds, in case he caught fire again.
Roy had come to be a little gun-shy of lightning storms that come across the Shenandoah Valley. Of course, from this area here, you can see them approach from the west, and Roy had gotten to the point where he was a little leery of those, and when he was out on patrol duty, he would move either further south or further north in his patrol, and what he wasn't going to do is stay in that storm.
Even though he tried outrunning the thunderstorms, in June 1976, Roy was struck again for a record 6th time. And his troubles weren't over yet. The following year, while out fishing, Roy was struck for the 7th time, and he became known as the human lightning rod.
People have called him that before, human lightning conductor, but I don't know. I don't know if it was a chemical mineral in his body. He said that before.
Roy was worried that metal on his body might be attracting the lightning.
He didn't even wear a wedding ring or a watch because of that. He didn't wear those.
Belt buckles and metal zips fuse and melt after a lightning strike, and many lightning survivors have terrible burns from metal objects that they were holding or wearing. But does metal on the body actually attract lightning? At a high-voltage lab in Manchester, England, researchers are preparing to find out.
We use an impulse generator, which is charged to a voltage of approximately 1.5 million volts, causing a simulated lightning bolt. Mannequins have been painted with an electrically conductive paint so that they simulate the resistance of the skin of a human under normal conditions.
Various metal objects have been attached to the test dummy on the left to see if it will be struck by lightning more times than the one on the right. In this test, the dummy without metal was actually struck more often than the one with metal. Just like a real lightning strike, the electrical flashover has left telltale fractal patterns on the dummy's body. If Roy Sullivan did have any metal on his body, it should have had no effect. Lightning experts believe it was due to a combination of high exposure and bad luck.
Roy Sullivan was outdoors in an area with quite a bit of lightning. He was exposed to the lightning a great deal, more than most people are. A visitor is maybe there for a few hours or a day or so, but he was there for many years, and that cumulative effect catches up with you.
At Florida's Kennedy Space Center, NASA has learned to take the lightning threat very seriously.
9, 8, ignition sequence start. 6, 5.
Apollo 12 was about to take the second manned mission to the moon. It was raining that day, but there were no thunderstorms in the vicinity. The rocket was cleared for takeoff. 36 seconds after the launch, disaster struck.
Fuel cell lights and AC bus light. A fuel cell disconnect. AC bus overload 1 and 2. Main
As Apollo disappeared beyond the clouds, Commander Pete Conrad reported catastrophic failures to the electrical systems.
Yeah, there are problems here. I don't know what happened. I'm not sure we can get hit by lightning.
Conrad was right. These photographs revealed that it was struck not once, but twice, by lightning that came seemingly from nowhere. Quick thinking by Mission Control helped them restore power, but it was a close call.
We've had a couple of cardiac arrests down here too, Pete. I think we need to do a little more all-weather testing. Amen.
It was a problem that needed urgent attention. NASA dispatched test pilots to seek out thunderstorms. Their missions took them through turbulence and hailstones which could tear a jumbo jet apart.
It was one of the very early strikes that we had where it struck the nose boom, as many of our lightning strikes did, and it then swept up over the top of the windshield, down that metal bar that was over the top of our heads in the canopy. And I could just happen to look up, and I could see helical chunks of plasma as the lightning channel broke apart as it flew back over the top of my head.
The onboard camera revealed something totally unexpected. The plane wasn't just intercepting lightning, it was actually triggering it by interfering with the electrical field inside the cloud. As Apollo 12 flew through the cloud of charged ice particles, it left a wake of hot ionized gases and conductive contaminants. The exhaust became a huge streamer, and the burning rocket plasma a giant lightning rod. Commercial aircraft can also trigger lightning. The plane sends out a positive leader into the electrified cloud, sometimes with deadly results. In 1988, a plane similar to this one took off in heavy rain from Hanover, Germany. Within minutes, it hit the ground, killing everyone on board. Examination of the wreckage and information from the black box flight recorder puzzled the investigators. The plane had been flying upside down before it tore apart and crashed.
The pilots were seen from the ground to come in and out of the clouds a couple times and put enough stress on the plane that a wheel came off, one of the wheels that was down, and that caused the plane apparently to flip over or partly over, and a wing came off. Then the plane crashed.
Fortunately, most planes are fairly well protected against lightning.
The main lightning protection for an all-metal plane, which is every modern airplane, is the metal skin. The whole plane is metal. The metal is bonded together. The pieces are connected. If the lightning current strikes it, the lightning stays in the outside and doesn't generally cause any damage. There are some vulnerable places, however. One of these is the radome. This piece here is plastic. The radar operates through it, so it can have a little bit of metal, but it can't have much. These very often get damaged by lightning strikes. The other vulnerable points are through the antenna, through the windows. If the lightning strikes on the plane, the electric and magnetic fields of the lightning cause voltages inside on the electronics, which can damage the electronics. In the case of the 1988 crash of the Fairchild in Germany, apparently the actual cause of the crash was a lightning strike to the plane that put out all the electrical instruments, and particularly the lights, so the pilots who were flying in the dark couldn't see what they were doing.
Because NASA has built its launch pads in the heart of Lightning Alley, it can't afford to take any more chances.
We can have 2,000 to 3,000 cloud-to-ground lightning strikes in 1 year. The shuttle out on the pad is a $2 billion investment. So you can have anywhere from a complete loss of vehicle and loss of payloads to astronauts killed. So we do not, under any circumstances, ever want to get hit by lightning.
The first line of defense is prediction, knowing accurately when and where the most dangerous thunderstorms will happen. At Cape Canaveral, the 45th Weather Squadron watches out for storm systems around the clock. Weather patterns in Florida are notoriously fickle. Thunderstorms can grow in minutes.
Depending on how big the cloud was, we have danger zones of 5 nautical miles and 10 nautical miles.
I don't know, they're not, some of them.
They can spot a threatening thundercloud an hour before it gets to the Cape, giving a vital early warning to the people out on the launch pad.
It's deadly, especially when you're on launch pads that are 100 to 150 feet in the air, and it makes people that are working on those pads very vulnerable. It's very dangerous. That noise is an alarm on one of our radars. When a storm gets to a certain intensity, that siren goes off, and it tells us that a storm is getting stronger, and we have to look at that storm quickly. And if it's too strong, it is potential for producing lightning, and it would be in our area. We'd have to issue the warnings.
25 mile an hour. I'm going to issue phase 1 for all areas of Kennedy right now.
Okay.
Here, that's got, I'm going to issue all areas phase 1 for
Okay, I'll
Kennedy.
put the winds out at 17 also, going to 5 to match phase 1.
Astronauts on the launch pad are already taking great risks. The lightning threat makes them even worse. So they are now protected from lightning by another line of defense.
The lightning protection system at the pad here consists of an overhead shield wire. It's a 1/2-inch wire rope steel cable. It goes from the top of a 75-foot insulated fiberglass mass It runs 1,000 feet north to a termination point right here just behind me, to 1,000 foot south to another termination point where the electric energy from a lightning strike is captured by the shield wire and then taken into ground at the termination points on either side.
Despite these efforts, the danger remains. In the last 10 years, 2 people have been struck, though no one has been killed in over 35 years. Advances in meteorology have helped reduce the risks, but for sailors who take to the sea in small boats, freak lightning storms are still threatening their lives. Morgan Wells, an experienced yachtsman, was taking his family and friends out for what should have been a short trip around the Chesapeake Bay. It was a perfect day for boating, sunny and calm. Just before setting off, Morgan listened to the weather forecast. There was a slight chance of rain, but nothing he heard would prepare him for what was to come and the terrible pain he would suffer. 7 miles away, a potentially deadly weather system was forming. Within 5 minutes, his whole crew would be at its mercy. Just a quarter of a mile from the shore, the temperature dropped 30 degrees. The sky turned black. Morgan and his friends were in the center of a rare but deadly weather system, a microburst.
Well, microbursts are defined to be only a few miles or kilometers across, and they only last a few minutes. For ships and for aircraft, the winds will first come from one direction, and then as it passes over or you fly through it, the wind actually comes with equal speed from the other direction of 75 or 100 miles an hour. So it makes a very, very complex, difficult situation.
As we approached Greenberry Point here with all the towers, these huge towers, there was a tremendous amount of cloud-to-ground lightning, which is a bit shocking, to say the least. It was more than I'd really ever seen in all the storms I'd ever been in.
Even the National Weather Service was caught off guard. By the time they issued the first warning, it was too late. Visibility was already down to 0, and lightning was flashing all around Morgan's boat.
Then the last thing I saw was the windshield exploding in front of my face. A brilliant flash of blinding light turning yellow and orange, and the windshield just, being blown out. And out went the lights. My sight was largely gone because my eyes were hemorrhaged. It was like looking through a rust stain or whatever. The other sensation was hearing. It sounded like someone was playing with the radio dials. All this frequency, this high squealing, and what I thought was, we're all going to die, Daddy's dead, Daddy's dead.
The small boat had taken a direct hit, destroying the radio and most of the electronics. With no way of calling for help, they were heading deeper into the microburst. Almost blind and barely able to hear, Morgan managed to push the throttle forward and drove the boat onto the nearest beach.
I remember choking. I knew I was hurt really bad. I kept putting my hand on my head, thinking I'd put my hand into my head. That's what I thought I would, and I knew I was bleeding, and I knew I was hurt pretty bad. I started running to the right, towards that big house. That was the only house I saw. And a lightning bolt strikes not but 100 yards, or maybe even less. And that stopped me cold.
Dodging the lightning bolts, one of his crew ran to a house and raised the alarm.
I've never been near a thunderstorm that has thrown down that many continuous bolts and in such a very close proximity. And we're not talking about waiting minutes, we're talking about every 10 seconds there was a smash and a crack.
Ron Holly was able to go back through lightning detection records and home in on the microburst that hit the Chesapeake Bay that afternoon.
And we can see the storm come from the northwest. In 10 minutes, the lightning is up to 400 flashes. 10 more minutes, 646 flashes. Within 5 miles and 3 hours of the time of the strike to the boat, there were 1,008 flashes that struck the water and the land right nearby where his boat was.
Out of those 1,000 lightning bolts, one had hit Morgan's boat.
It blew a hole right through the ceiling. So this is a layer of fiberglass, plywood, something you could actually stand on and jump. It was that solid. And it described a perfect hole where the VHF antenna had been mounted. So there was a mounting screws and very much just like this. So if I'm standing at the wheel, the lightning blows a hole right through here, and its focus then is to here, right to here, and that probably saved my life.
Morgan's injuries were horrific. The lightning exited his body at hundreds of places, giving the appearance of shotgun wounds. His hair was scorched. He was bleeding from the eyes and his eardrums had exploded. It would take 3 operations to restore his hearing and several years to make sense of what had happened.
People say, well, there must have been something about the boat. It was a good ground. It must have been a good ground. What made that boat a good ground? And it's, there was thousands of strikes in a very, very short period of time in a very small area. And it just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
In the summer of 1994, a mysterious and tragic incident on a clear blue day was to upset the experts' understanding of just how far lightning can reach. It was a beautiful afternoon in Colorado, and hundreds of people were out soaking up the summer sunshine. But out of the clear blue sky, nature played a cruel trick.
It happened on a day when there wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was a clear blue sky when, from out of the blue, a bicyclist was struck by lightning. It seemed mysterious to us because where was the cloud from which this lightning originated? This was the first opportunity we thought we had to investigate it, to find out where that cloud was. And to do that, we sought the help of Global Atmospherics in Tucson.
But would Global's system be sensitive enough to pinpoint this mysterious bolt?
We went back and plotted the data for the 3-hour period around the time when this event happened in Vail. If we look here at the screen, we can see the flash over Colorado, and in this case, there was only one flash within 20 miles of this particular location in Vail. This is definitely the one that struck the person.
They found that the single lightning strike in this county at that time of day, on that day, originated in a cloud 10 miles on the other side of this mountain. That cloud was not visible in the valley, so there was no reason for the people, including our patient, to seek shelter. But it is not unknown for lightning to travel some distance, including, in this case, 10 miles, in other instances even more, before it takes a downward dip to reach the ground.
They may appear to come out of the blue, but they are coming out of a thunderstorm for reasons we don't understand. But the lightning sometimes will come out sideways from the cloud rather than down below it.
Lightning is capricious. Lightning, which is a beautiful phenomenon of nature, and we all can sit and watch it, but it also can be one of the most cruel phenomena of nature. And this one was particularly cruel because it was hidden.
Lightning is among the biggest natural hazards, killing more people each year in the U.S. than hurricanes, tornadoes, and earthquakes. The paramedics in Lightning Alley are only too aware of this. This storm has already claimed its first victim. Who will be next?